Hello everyone, welcome to Unit 5. I'm very happy that we are over our first analytical paper, and in this short video I would like to briefly reflect on the lessons learned, the lessons I've learned through the first papers, and a little bit move on to the main topic of Unit 5, which is implementation. So just briefly, I found the papers content-wise very high quality regarding your individual points, the reflections you made regarding potentials and pitfalls and challenges in the school settings. And what I felt through your papers, that you really understood what you meant, and you had a connection to your own field, to your own context, and you had a very practical insight into what these challenges are. What I find as areas to develop, and I especially mention it for future use in other IIRP courses, as well as for the second analytical paper within this course, is to maybe help your reader a little bit with being able to follow your argument. So when you write such a paper, always think about someone, lay person, someone, for example, your uncle or your aunt or a neighbor who doesn't know anything about restorative practices. However, he or she is interested in what you are doing, why you are doing it. So try to make your language and the link within the text and the consistency of the text as understandable as possible. So what can help? For example, in the introduction, when you say, in the following paper, I will briefly discuss 3 points, or I will base my argument on four details. Detail number 1, detail number 2. So if you give a structure in the introduction already, your reader knows what we are reading about, where we are in the process of your paper. Also, when you detail the paragraph, you can mention, now I will continue with point number 2, which is this and that. At the end, when you talk about counter arguments, you can say, regardless of all these all these points, we can also mention as counter arguments this and that. And then the end, you can say to conclude, or to finish up, or to sum up. So these terms, although I'm not a native and you are much more expert in using your language, but these kind of linking texts and structuring texts largely help the digestion and the understanding of your argument. And another point is APA. What I found that most of you try to follow the guideline as cautiously as possible, and I know it's a lot of details and a lot of extras that we have to take care of. But I really recommend going through your paper before submission once more with your printed guideline and check all the references, all the dots, all the commas, all the quotation marks, all the reference list details. Once it becomes a routine, and don't worry, it can become a routine after 1 or 2 papers, so it's not a rocket science, but put this extra time and go through the printed paper before you submit once more, and then it will be part of your routine. And once you have it in your hand, it will happen much more easily for future papers, both within this course and in any other courses you take, either with IIRP or with other universities. So for the second paper, I would appreciate these kind of self-developments, and I try to help your unlearning with my individual comments. However, if you have any question, or you need some clarification and you would like to improve your paper for a better grade, and you want to talk through what I meant by certain comments, feel free to drop me an email. We'll set up a Zoom, or we discuss everything through email as it's the best for you. Okay, so turning to Unit 5, I think it's a quite exciting part of the work we are all doing, because it's basically focusing on implementation. how we make sure that not only us in the micro level, individual level, but also our own community, our organization is dealing with the restorative approach and opening up. Why will people around us open up towards these ideas? I think that the materials under Unit 5 are very useful, very ground-based, very practice-based, and they were developed based on the certain projects and implementation models of IIRP, all done by practitioners who did the work in the field and reflected on what works and what's not, and developed certain elements and practices and essential parts that are needed to make an implementation sustainable on the whole organization. Also, you can find a very interesting video from a Philadelphia school that shows the actual students and teachers' feedback on implementing restorative practices. And if you just, or from my perspective, I would say that all these processes are about change. Changing within ourselves, changing in our interventions and interactions with the environment, and change of the whole organization. To me, change is a highly vulnerable act that can allow shame as well. And we know that shame can be very harmful for future behavior, especially uncommunicated shame. So whenever we deal with change, we deal with the risk of shaming and the risk of resistance or fears or counteracts. So I think that it's important to know that change initiators deal with very sensitive issues. And since I thought to share with you one little tale and two drawings and a short video in this video regarding how I look at these changes. So I try to share my screen now and move to a tale that you might also know because it's coming from the indigenous Indian culture where it's a very well-known tale and it's also shared all over the world. However, often I use this as a beginning of a circle or as a training or as a lecture because even I read it for or I learned it years ago, it still helps me to set up the priorities of this work. So an old Cherokee is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. He continued. The other is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on inside you and inside every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "But which wolf will win?" And the old Cherokee simply replied, "The one you feed." So my question is that when we implement, which wolf do we feed in our colleagues, in our bosses, in our students, in the parents of the school, in ourselves? And it's crucial that we feed the one that can bring positive emotions and effects. And it is a responsibility on us as leaders of such processes. Another slide I thought to show you that I really like is about a rhino. I hope I pronounce it properly. Painting the picture of the presence of the scene. And it's beautiful, and the scene is beautiful, and the paintings are beautiful. They are all slightly different, and they are all more or less similar to the original ones. But there is this horn of the rhino being there all the time, which is not there in the real life. But he or she feels it's there because it feels it. and and we often like that. We feel we know the presence, we feel we know the truth, but it's defined and dependent on our past, what we experienced in our past, or even our ancestors' past. As you know, the intergenerational traumas impact. So all the untold traumas, all the untold stories, all the harms that we or our ancestors suffered might have an impact on how we see the presence. It's the same for an everyday people, it's the same for students or teachers. And I think it's very important that when we focus on change and implementation, then we are sensitive and aware that each of us has their own horns. And through this work, we need to be able to talk about what happened before and how we relate to each other and to the change itself and to ourselves. And it's a lot of work. The other and the last figure drawing I wanted to show you, besides showing you 3 words in Hungarian, is that how typically we see that people in a circle or in a conflict, they see their truth. I mean, the mouse says it's a square, the cat says it's a triangle, the dog says it's a square, and not square, rectangle. They all they all see their truth, and they are right. The question is whether they see the cheese itself. And if not, because if you are affected in a conflict, in most of the cases you are not able to see the entire cheese. But you need to step a little bit back and see, oh wow, this is a cheese. Or there needs to be a professional or a facilitator or a layperson, a supporter who is not involved in the situation and can step one back and see and show the common points and show the cheese itself, the issue itself in its complexity. Again, linked to the implementation, I think it's very important that when we are in a process ourselves with our colleagues, that we try to visualize and show what is the overall aim, what are the principles, and what is the overall vision of what we are doing, not just the individual actions we all believe in. Related to that, I just read a very interesting article by John Bailey, president of IARP, on LinkedIn, and he said in his article, don't master plan, master principles, meaning that stable your interventions on principles and not on certain plans, because plans might change anytime because conditions change, but we need to have solid basis and principles in order to stay consistent. So I think that all these processes help us to know what we are doing and why we are doing and how to change certain plans when circumstances force us to change certain plans. And also the detailed materials under Unit 5 will show you very practical tips and methods of PLG and certain restorative and impromptu conferences and questions, and proactive circles, reactive circles, conferences, etc. How it can be set up, not only the training, but these interventions, but also a support of a coach that can help with the ongoing training of the staff. Also, PLG's professional learning group are detailed in a document, and I highly recommend to apply that kind of method. These are all about really being able to sit down, look at what goes well, talk openly about our dilemmas and challenges, and use the resources and strengths and ideas of colleagues and others around us. But we all need a leader who believes in such a change, or we are the ones who need to lead such processes. So I thought at the end of this video, I just show you a little part, not more than 1 minute, that we recorded in a school in a Hungarian village where we had a circle with elementary school children talking about leaders and leaderships. And what they expect from a leader, let's say from a fair leader. And I just found it very cute how they phrase it. I hope you will be able to see the subtitles so that you understand. You will hear a little bit of Hungarian narrative. You will see these children. You will see that we work with a, I don't know what's the name. Anyway, it's a special, it was a special exercise where we gave the talking piece to each other. And I think, yeah, it's nice to finish this video with the words of these children on what they respect in a leader.
Milyen az az ember, akit ti szívesen követtek, aki olyan dolgokat tud nektek mondani, amit megfontoltok, ami nektek követhető, szimpatikus, magyarán egy jó vezető.
Hogy egy igazi vezető magabiztos legyen, és tudja, hogy mit kell tenni, és nem csak spontán gondolatai szerint mond valamit, hanem megfontoltan.
Tudnia kell, hogy mit akar, valaki sír vagy elesik, és akkor mondja, hogy bátor legyél, meg folytasd tovább.
Én nem szeretnék, hogyha parancsolgatnak nekem, de számomra az a jó vezető, aki meghallgassa a másikat, hogy a másik is mit akar, nem parancsolgat senkinek, meghallgassa és úgy dönt.
Kids basically defined restorative approaches and the fair leadership and fair decision making, I think, in their words. And interestingly, when we went to this classroom, their teachers and headmaster were very skeptical whether we can get to anywhere, because they were supposed to be the worst class and kids who don't behave. And how interestingly, they were sitting in a circle, they were asked questions they could answer, and wonderful ideas and wonderfully bright and humorous and get to the point concepts came out through them. So I really found this experience very, very inspiring. So basically, this is what I thought to share with you in this video. And all I would sum up here is that we will have very useful structures. We will have very good frameworks and elements to continue implementation in our organizations. But we should never forget the basic principles and the basic cornerstones of why we are doing what we are doing and what they are based off. And we need to have a reality, a mindfulness, and staying mindful on the reality, what we are the control of, and how we can support the ongoing positive control and the positive support towards the people we are working with in the implementation process. So happy readings, happy writings for the forum, and good luck with all the projects you are doing over there, and see you soon in Unit 6. Bye-bye.